Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I am your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very, very special guest here for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Hello, I'm Todd Medema, calling from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay, and can you tell me about your past leading up into your present, however extensive you want to go?
Yeah, so I have a background in software engineering and approached the world from this, like, let's build uh, engineering systems. And very quickly I realized that there's a lot more to having a positive impact in the world than just building something. You have to build something that's meaningful and impactful. And so I made the transition into working in clean energy. I worked on the Tesla Megapack grid scale battery for about 4 years, and then was part of a layoff, and now work at Nextracker, which is a really cool solar panel company where I do software product management. And then on my nights and weekends, I write solar punk fiction. So most recently, I published a book called How to Surf a Hurricane, which is a hopeful climate heist.
Well said. And what inspired you to blend the high stake excitement of a heist thriller with pressing themes of climate change and how to surf a hurricane?
Yeah. So one of the big things that inspired me to write this book was a friend had shared with me this idea that most of the stories we have about climate change are one of three archetypes. There is the like billionaire tech genius will save us. There's the kids will save us, and then the future is going to be a dystopian hellscape that we brought on ourselves. We can think of plenty of stories that fit in those three buckets, and there's really not a lot of other stories. And so and that's a real problem for the environmental movement, because when you only tell a limited type of stories, you only bring in a limited group of people. And so I thought to myself, I really enjoy heist movies, Ocean's 11, The Bad Guys, but I've never seen or read something that was a climate heist. So let's do that.
So this climate heist, they basically hijacked the climate. Is that what you're saying?
They steal top secret batteries that are important to the clean energy transition.
That is so cool. Oh my God. So tell everybody, my audience, what is climate change? Because some people may not know.
Yeah, so climate change is usually referred to as the phenomenon of greenhouse gas emissions caused by humans, resulting in changes to our planet's weather patterns, uh, generally resulting in an increase in average global temperatures.
Do you think that climate change also affect humans? Because I noticed that the more we're downtown with a bunch of cars, the more like aggressive people are in their cars, especially in bumper to bumper traffic. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, climate change is definitely going to have impacts on humans directly. It's going to have huge implications in terms of rising sea levels, effects on food production, making some areas difficult to live in. But you actually have a really good point about the cars too, that a lot of the things that cause climate change are bad for us in a lot of other ways. Like in the US, we drive a lot of private individual cars, and most of those cars are gas powered. And so we're spewing a lot of emissions into the air, which is bad for our lung health and for our communities. And we're also spending all of this time, stuck in traffic, engaged in this very infuriating activity, when instead, if we chose to invest in something like trains and buses as a society, not only would there be fewer emissions, and your lungs would be happier, but also you would get all of that time back. Instead of honking at your horn and at the person in front of you, you would be sitting there reading a book.
Well said. How do you think we can, what is the first process of changing climate? Because I hear people saying that climate change is fake, and I believe that, just as we get a cold, we catch a fever, the climate can change and catch a fever or, warm. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I have heard this very interesting analogy that, humans get a fever to help eradicate sickness from their body, and like climate change is like the earth getting a fever to eradicate sickness in humans. It's deep and kind of scary. But um, I think there's a lot of things that we can do about climate change, and at a lot of different levels. There's things that we as individuals can do. There's things that we can work with our local communities to do, and there's also things that government, societal, species level. I think some of the really big governmental ones are very intimidating and hard to see how like you as an individual could impact them. So I tend to focus on individual and local actions as things that we as individual people can get behind.
Okay, and does fracking hurt our climate, like drilling for oil? Does that hurt our climate?
Yeah, so fracking for natural gas and drilling for oil, the actual drilling process itself does not technically impact the climate, but producing all of this oil and natural gas that then gets burned, it's the burning of those fossil fuels that produces the carbon dioxide emissions. And so, the fact that we extract them at all then means that we're definitely going to burn them. So, simply put, yes, drilling and fracking is bad for climate change and the environment.
Are there like alternate ways to keep like alternate climate such as solar energy that's pretty safe? Is there other options? Because I even had an option, but it may, fall by the wayside to like take the dirt and kind of like compress it and melt it down for energy source, but I could be wrong. I don't know, but it has to be some type of clean energy way we can keep resources that like rare earth minerals or whatever the case, something that we can change the climate with, where it'll be clean energy more so than just solar energy. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So I volunteered at Citizens Climate Lobby for many years, and they had this amazing saying at the organization, which was, "There's no silver bullet for climate change. There is silver buckshot." There's not a single solution that will fix everything. We need all of the possible solutions. And
Understood.
so solar is a huge part of that. That's why I work in the solar industry. I think it's going to be absolutely instrumental to the clean energy transition. But there's also a lot of other technologies that are going to be a part of that. There's wind power, hydropower, nuclear power, even biomass. To your point, we can grow trees and then burn the trees to produce power. And that actually does not produce new carbon emissions because it's all part of the carbon cycle. The trees were already like in our environment. So there's a lot of really interesting technologies and approaches to generating energy, and each of them have their own advantages and disadvantages, which is why it's so important to think of it as this whole portfolio of options.
Well said. I think that's fair to have a variety of options. So, as director of product management at nextracker, how has your work in solar power influenced the innovative technologies featured in your novel?
Absolutely. A key part of the book is this heist of top secret batteries, and so everything I learned about that I learned about through working in clean energy on the mega packet Tesla, and uh, I think the book is a very fast-paced heist. It's designed to be very accessible, very quick to read, and so you don't really need an engineering background going into it. But the world itself is rich with all of these details from my personal life, from a career in clean energy, from places that I visited in person.
Okay, and alternate, like I also suggested, I was on this Instagram live video of NASA, and I suggested them being able, I don't think we're at that point where we can, but being able to harvest a sun like energy from a dormant planet, a planet that don't need a second or third sun, and then put it like in our solar system for extra energy and to keep, the world from actually, because one day the world will end. But I was thinking about that, and I was wondering, with the extra sun or extra energy in our solar system, what could that be, and would that be more energy we can harness? Because
Yeah.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so solar power is beautiful because it's harvesting energy from the sun. And the crazy thing is how much energy our sun emits just onto Earth. I believe it's something like if humanity used like 1% of the energy that the sun shines onto Earth, we could power ourselves completely cleanly. So we don't even need a
Wow.
second sun.
I didn't know that. See, that's why they ignored the question. Okay, so my next question is, how did you decide on your ocean-based heist setting, and what research went into making the surfing and storm scenes feel authentic?
Yeah, this is a great question. So the idea of surfing a hurricane came from one of the central premises of the book to me, which is climate change is going to be challenging and we're going to have to adapt to it in a lot of ways. But what is a way that we could find joy in these changes that are happening? And so with climate change, we're going to see more and more storms, extreme weather events, and more hurricanes. And so I thought to myself, what if someone made an extreme sport out of the fact that there's more and more hurricanes? And so to make that more realistic, uh, I
They basically bet on the hurricanes. They
well
like, I
they
put a
surf a
dollar down.
hurricane. Uh, so this is a sport that does not exist, but I think
Exactly.
in the time frame of the book, in the next like 15 years, um, someone could actually achieve reasonably do. So you can see on the cover of the book, there's this boat. Oh, camera, my camera's going off the rails here. There we go. And you can there we go. So you can see on the cover of the book, there's this boat on a hydrofoil, and so the professional hurricane surfers in the book designed this ship to ride in the extreme wind and waves in a hurricane. And to come up with the ship, I actually consulted with a friend who has a career in high performance boat building, and that was very humbling because all of my original ideas on how the boat would work he tossed out the window. But ultimately, he did help me design something that's possible and buildable.
So how do they bet on the hurricane? Do they physically track the hurricane, or are they on this boat? That's what I want to get to know.
Yeah. So the hurricane surfing athletes are in these tiny hydrofoil boats, actually riding the waves in a hurricane. And so the goal of the sport, at least as it begins, is just who can go the fastest. And they're trying to set the world speed record for fastest boat in a hurricane.
That is so cool. That is going, I would see, like you said, 15 years from now, somebody probably would be doing that. So, the next question would be, your book portrays a hopeful future amid climate changes. How do you hope it changes readers' perspectives on environmental action?
I think what I hope people take away from this book is the power of taking action. Because right now, a lot of people I talk to are stuck in this mindset of it is too late. There's nothing we can do. The problem is too big for me to help. And that's not true. Like, that is what literally the fossil fuel industry has spent billions of dollars of marketing convincing us that we are powerless. And so I want people who read How to Surf a Hurricane to walk away from this remembering how powerful we are.
Well said. So, Moral, the young inventor protagonist seems to draw real world engineers you've encountered. What aspects of their mindset did you want to highlight?
Yeah, as an engineer myself, it was his character was probably the easiest for me to write because that's kind of how my brain works. Uh, I think the beautiful thing about the engineering mindset is that you're not afraid of problems. At one point, Morrow literally says like everything is an engineering problem, right? And that's a little naive. Obviously, there are humans and people, and it's more than just an engineering problem. But if we can look at more problems from this perspective of what is, what are other approaches? What's the optimal way to do this? What am I even trying to optimize for? A lot of problems in our world, I think they become a little bit clearer. Like we were talking about earlier with like cars in transit. It's like if I'm optimizing for me getting from my home to my office or something, what are other options? Could I bike? Could I take an Uber? Could I take a bus? Could I rent a private jet? Like let's just start by brainstorming, and then let's think like an engineer. Like what are the pros and cons and trade-offs of each of those solutions? How can we improve them? Like maybe if I have to drive anyway because I'm too far to bike and there's no bus service, then it's actually more optimal for me to get like an electric car or a hybrid.
Well said. And to piggyback off of you, do you think that there should be more transportation options for cheaper, like for instance, California came out in other major cities with the remote control cars that drive themselves, and there are options in China where you can fly. They have a cab where you can fly, and they
Mhm.
fly you to your destination. Do you think that those are other options too to have better air quality?
Yeah. So the biggest thing for air quality specifically is switching from gasoline to electric. So whether it's driving an individual car or you're taking a bus, a lot of cities are also switching their buses from gasoline to electricity, and so that's just a win for everyone because not only is it better for air quality, but it's cheaper. And so if your buses are cheaper to run, then that means you can literally have more buses and give more people access to transit options.
Yeah, they have had those hybrid vehicles. Where do you see gas in the next, maybe, let's just go for 15, 20 years? Do you see it as obsolete?
I do. I follow the industry pretty closely, and there's a lot of research that's showing that we're kind of reaching peak gasoline consumption. Most gasoline, in particular, is consumed by vehicles. Other fossil fuels like coal are maybe more for electricity generation, but oil and gas are mostly for cars. And so, as the world switches more and more to hybrid and electric cars, our consumption of gasoline is starting to finally decrease. And so, I think we're going to actually hit an inflection point easily within the next 10 or 15 years, where it's actually easier to own an electric car than a gas car. For a long time, people would hesitate to buy an electric car because they would be like, well, where will I charge it? There's 10 gas stations around me, but there's no chargers. But as more people buy electric cars, we build more charging stations. And as fewer people have gas cars, more and more gas stations will go out of business or be converted to electric vehicle chargers. And so we're gonna hit this like spiral point where it's just gonna become easier and easier to own an electric car, and people are just gonna stop buying gas cars.
And this is just my own question. I have to ask this question, but where do you know what will surpass electric vehicles, or are we looking ahead of electric vehicles right now?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting thing in the environmental movement. Is some people maybe argue like, why are we thinking about it in a 10-year period? We should be thinking about it in a 100 or 1,000-year period. And so, maybe if we're thinking about it in a 1,000-year period, like maybe electric cars aren't the right thing. But I actually think that they are
Me
the
too.
best solution that we even can conceive of today. The main competitor would be a hydrogen car. And when I've looked at the engineering for that, it ultimately doesn't make any sense. Hydrogen consumes a lot of electricity to make the hydrogen. So it's actually less energy efficient than just using electricity. And hydrogen is a very difficult element to work with. You need incredibly tight seals and very specialized materials to store and use it. So it's actually pretty impractical. And the other big argument against electric cars has been that they're bad for the environment. That it takes a lot of energy to produce them, or that the materials that build the batteries, it requires a lot of extraction. But what I think people miss about that is that electric vehicle batteries are incredibly recyclable. Over 90% of the material in an electric vehicle battery can be recycled into a new battery. And so once we convert our vehicles to electric vehicles, it's actually incredibly sustainable. We can, with barely any material extraction, we can keep building the same electric vehicles over and over, recycling them for hundreds of years.
Is that the same where the spaceships that Tesla make? I forgot what they call them.
Oh,
What do they call them
the
again?
Falcon 9 and Starship rockets.
Yeah, they are recyclable too, right?
Yeah, so those are actually reusable, which is even better.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Cars are obviously reusable because you can drive it somewhere and then you can drive it again and you can keep driving it. It's just weird that up until now, space rockets were not reusable. Every time you used it, you had to just throw the whole thing away. So the big innovation there has been making them reusable, so you can fly the same rocket multiple times. And
Do you
in
think
everything, being able to reuse it is better than being able to recycle it, because recycling is still great, but it does consume energy. You have to melt something down, you have to remanufacture it. So it's way better than landfilling it. But if you can reuse something directly, then that's awesome.
do you think that going to Mars is beneficial for our human race? Is the start of, a benefit for our human race to continue down this race of trying to stay irrelevant or not, you know?
There are lots of opinions on this. I don't think there's a singular answer, but I can share my opinion. And my opinion is that in our lifetime, we are not going to have anything established on Mars that's like a standalone colony. Like, even if we start today super hard, it's such a hard problem that for generations, probably Mars would be dependent on Earth. And so, this idea of like, oh, it's like a backup for the human species, maybe in the super long term. But what I think is important about the Mars project is this idea of the next frontier. Like, humans are inherently an adventurous species, and in the modern world, we've solved a lot of the adventure. Like, okay, like you can go climb a mountain or go skydiving or something, but there's not like new places to explore or discover. And so I think it's actually really valuable for us to have things like that to get excited about.
Yeah, because once the universe dies, what we're looking for a future goal is how can we sustain life in another universe before that universe carries out and dies. And what is your opinion on that? How our universe, millions of years from now is just going to grow cold and lukewarm, and then we're going to be like, that's the race, right? To try to extend life, like Z and Putin was talking about, immortality, life that can surpass 100 years or more. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts?
I mean, the problem of like the universe dying is like so far beyond our consideration. We're talking billions of years,
Yeah,
uh,
billions. Yeah,
and like it's interesting to think about, but the reality is like we have problems directly in front of us
I
in the
agree.
10 to 100 1,000 year time span that require real action. So it's like fun to talk about with friends over a glass of wine and postulate about, but like the yeah the problems directly in front of us of really profound things, not just climate change, but political division and you know geopolitical threats and war. Those have a much higher chance of being a species level problem.
Do you feel like we have more of a of, like you just said, war, wars and stuff that we are inflicted in with unnecessary conflict that maybe, could possibly destroy the majority of us in the future if we don't take the steps necessary to move forward in a peaceful like environment?
I absolutely think so. In the Cold War, we had to confront this reality that many nations now have nuclear weapons, and if even a small portion of those nuclear weapons are used in a war, it would essentially wipe out our species, both through direct explosions and then the resulting nuclear winter and decades of crop failures would essentially starve us. Um, I think right now the world has found an uneasy truce with nuclear weapons in particular. But now with climate change, we have to confront these new realities that on top of the idea of, kind of superpower on superpower nuclear war, there's going to be, from rising sea levels and from desertification, a lot of people are going to have to move out of where they live today. And so there's going to be, I think the last estimate I saw was potentially up to 1 billion climate refugees in the next 2 or 3 decades. And it's hard to even imagine 1 billion people moving, and they're not going to have a choice. It's not like any country will actually be able to say, like, no, you can't come here. There's going to be an unstoppable flood of people who have nowhere else to live. And so, done poorly, I think that's a tremendous threat that could cause a lot of people to lose their lives. Or if we as a society can come to appreciate that these people immigrating to our country are also human and they deserve respect and they want to be contributing members of society. They want to, be able to work and be proud of the things that they do, and they want to build communities. We can, open our hands. Like the Statue of Liberty was founded with the U.S. was this idea that like we open ourselves to immigrants because we're all in this together. We're all humans, and so yeah, I think that's really important that we keep this in mind as these trends happen.
One last question before I ask you about the future. How long do we have based on your calculations? I'm not trying to throw anybody in a scare tactic, but I just want to know, based on your calculations of being, seeing a lot of science stuff, what is the calculations of how long it will be before we 1 billion? That's like almost 25% of the population, being having to move, that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, how long we have is really up to us, and that is why I wrote How to Surf a Hurricane, to remind us that we don't have to sit idly by and watch the worst version of our future pan out. We can take action and we can help make a better future for ourselves and the people we care about.
And where do you see yourself going in the future, Todd?
I love working in clean energy. Uh, so I'm going to keep working in clean energy and I'm going to keep telling hopeful stories of the climate.
And how can the people reach you?
Yeah, so if you are interested in myself or my book, you can learn more at howtosurfahurricane.com.
Stay on the line, Todd. Thank you, everybody, for joining my show today. Take care, be safe, and I'll see you guys another time. Bye.
Never waste my time. You are I want.